In October 1964, a real political explosion was brewing in the Kremlin. Khrushchev was still sitting in the first secretary's chair, but behind his back preparations were already underway for his removal. The reason? He had changed the rules of the game too much, and many people no longer liked it. At first, Khrushchev seemed like a reformer, the exposure of Stalin, amnesty, thaw. But over time it became clear he acts abruptly, often alone, without consulting even his closest people. His decisions either pleased or shocked. He could appoint a person to a high position and a week later dismiss him without explanation. The old party elite suffered especially badly. During his 11 years in power, Khrushchev fired more than 70% of the leaders who had worked under Stalin. These were proven cadres with a lot of experience, but Khrushchev considered them a brake on progress. He promoted his own people to key positions, young, loyal, but often without the necessary experience. This caused latent anger and discontent. Criticism was also aroused by his strange reforms, the merger of party and agricultural organizations, the division of leadership by sector, the merger of ministries. Many people did not understand what he was doing, and those who did were afraid of the consequences. The army, the KGB, party officials, everyone began to feel that the country was going the wrong way. International politics, too, added to the anxiety. In 1962, the whole world was on the brink of nuclear war. The Cuban Missile Crisis was the culmination of his foreign policy blunders. Khrushchev sent missiles to Cuba, triggering the threat of conflict with the US. In the end, the missiles had to be removed, and the Soviet Union looked weak. For a country that prided itself on its stability, this was a serious blow. But most annoying of all was his behavior. He often interrupted his interlocutors, shouted, made jokes at inappropriate times, and humiliated his subordinates in public. Even those who had previously supported him began to tire of him. Disgruntled remarks were heard more and more often at closed meetings, but no one spoke directly out loud. No one openly accused Khrushchev. Everyone understood. While he was in power, any word against him could turn into a career collapse. Therefore, what can be called quiet sabotage began. Secretaries of the Central Committee, ministers, heads of republics stopped sharing the real situation with Khrushchev. They no longer reported to him about the mood in the party, nor did they tell him what decisions were causing outrage in the field. He lived in his own information bubble. He thought that everything was under control, although in fact, control was already lost. Khrushchev did not notice that his closest colleagues no longer reported to him about the Central Committee's plans. He spoke, and the others just nodded, already making new plans without his input. At the head of this quiet operation were three key figures: Leonid Brezhnev, Mikhail Suslov, and Vladimir Semychastny, head of the KGB. Each had his own role in the coup. Brezhnev was the main candidate to replace Khrushchev. He didn't clash, he didn't get in the way. He always agreed. That's what made him convenient. He was perceived as his own, without ambition, but with a clear style. But behind the calm exterior hid a man who, step by step, prepared the ground for coming to power. Suslov, the main ideologist, the brain of the party. It was he who coordinated the actions of the conspiracy. He didn't shout, he didn't threaten, he didn't speak. He did everything through personal conversations, at dachas, in offices, without witnesses. He realized that any written orders might surface. Suslov did not leave a single document or order. Everything was discussed orally, so as not to leave any evidence. The KGB played a special role. Without it, the coup would have been impossible. Khrushchev still controlled the army, the communications apparatus, the guards. If he had felt threatened, he could have used force. But this is where Semychastny, then head of the KGB, came into play. He knew what had to be done: disconnect communications, replace guards, take control of airports and holiday homes. Everything was calculated to the minute. It is important that the coup was carefully planned. No rallies, no army, no crowd. Everything happened behind closed doors. Nobody was going to shed blood. The task was to remove Khrushchev quietly and quickly. And the most amazing thing is that while the storm was brewing in the Kremlin, Khrushchev himself continued to smile, joke, travel around the country, and consider himself an unshakable leader. Once the plot was fully prepared, everything depended on one thing: how to remove Khrushchev without making a fuss. It was dangerous to do it right in Moscow. He still controlled the guards, communications, power structures. Therefore, the conspirators waited for the right moment. And it came in October 1964, when Khrushchev went on holiday to Pitsunda, his Black Sea dacha. His absence was a signal for action. In Moscow, they urgently began to assemble an emergency meeting of the Presidium of the Central Committee. Without him, the conspirators acted precisely and cold-bloodedly. One by one, they obtained the consent of the majority of the Politburo members. When the necessary signatures and votes were collected, all that remained was to return Khrushchev to the capital and bring the operation to an end. Khrushchev was forced to return to Moscow under the guise of an important meeting. He was told that he needed to discuss urgent matters. He did not suspect a trap. He got on a plane himself and flew straight to the center of the coup. When he arrived, there was nothing left at his disposal. The guards at the dacha had been replaced. Communications were down. His closest allies were silent. He found himself in complete isolation. The next morning, the Presidium met. Everything seemed outwardly calm. No shouting, no accusations. But the atmosphere was heavy. The conspirators read out a list of claims to Khrushchev: voluntarism, disorganization, economic mistakes. But the most surprising thing was that he did not fight back. Many expected that Khrushchev would be indignant, call the army, make a scandal. But none of this happened. He behaved calmly, even detached. Perhaps he realized that he had lost, or maybe he was just tired. He came to the hearing, listened to the accusations, and didn't argue. Not a single shout, not one threat, not one attempt to regain power. He silently admitted defeat. His last sentence at the meeting was, "I'm old and tired. It's time to rest." These words became a symbol of his departure, without a fight, without blood, without resistance. His resignation was announced just after lunch. No cameras, no press, without any official announcement in the moment. The very next day, the newspapers reported that he had resigned for health reasons. It was a rare case in the history of the USSR. An incumbent leader was removed from office without a shooting, without mass repression, and without public scandal. Khrushchev became the first leader of the country who was simply removed, politically, not physically. Some historians believe that Khrushchev could have tried to hold on. He had connections, the support of part of the elite, influence on the army. But he chose a different path. He did not fight for the chair. Perhaps he realized that if a conflict broke out, blood could be shed. The KGB was prepared for another scenario. In case Khrushchev started to resist, a plan was prepared to arrest him. But it was not needed. Khrushchev left voluntarily. After his resignation, Khrushchev found himself in isolation. He lived in an ordinary flat in a house near Moscow, without security, without influence. He was forbidden to speak, write memoirs, give interviews. Only in the last years of his life did he secretly dictate his memoirs, which were later published abroad. When Khrushchev was ousted, the conspirators faced the main question: who would be the new leader? There were several strong figures among the coup plotters: Suslov, Podgorny, Kirilenko. But Leonid Brezhnev was chosen. Why him? Brezhnev did not stand out. He was not a bright orator, did not climb on the podiums with sharp ideas, did not conflict. He was his for everyone, calm, restrained, able to listen. No one was afraid of him, and no one saw him as a threat. Therefore, many people perceived him as a compromise figure, a temporary leader who would not break anything. In the transcripts of the meetings at which the change of power was discussed, Brezhnev was explicitly referred to as a transitional figure. He was appointed as a man who would simply hold the power in his hands until someone stronger was found. But the reality turned out to be different. He stayed in power for 18 years. It's simple. Brezhnev didn't break anything. He did not carry out harsh reforms. He did not organize purges. On the contrary, he stabilized the system. He restored order, gave the party elite confidence that no one would remove them from their posts, as Khrushchev had done. He became a guarantor of peace, and many people liked it. Immediately after his appointment, a quiet sweep began. So that no one could come back and change the decision, Brezhnev and his entourage eliminated all possible risks. Khrushchev's personal archive was seized. Documents, records, letters, all this was taken away to prevent revenge or revelations. No one wanted Khrushchev to try to make a comeback through compromise or support from old connections. Brezhnev was not only convenient but also very cautious. He strengthened his position step by step, but he did it so gently that no one noticed. And when they did, it was too late. He was not a transitional figure. He became the master of the whole system. And this system worked for almost 2 decades without shocks.